We are live. John TheMorgile here, coming to you live from Greenville, South Carolina. I hope y'all are having a blessed day. Happy Sunday to you. And looks like we've got a couple of y'all in the live. Please, if you don't mind, give us a thumbs up if you can see and hear me loud and clear. I would much appreciate it. And
Join me.
oh, there we go. I think that means we're live there. Okay, sorry y'all. Let me get back over to my. Forgive me, I've got some technical difficulties going on here, y'all. Let me get in this thing here. What's up, Tasha Dillon? Hey, thank you. Oh, I appreciate that. What's up, Rocket? How about it, man? Excuse me. Tinfoil Hatter, what's up, brother? Hope you're doing well too, man. Real quick, just going to kick us off with a quick prayer. We're going to read Psalms 105. Give thanks to the Most High, call on Him, make known amongst the nations what He has done, sing to Him, make music to praise Him, meditate on all the miracles He has performed, brag about His holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Most High rejoice. Search for the Most High and His strength. Always seek His presence. Remember the miracles He performed, the amazing things He did, and the judgments He pronounced, you descendants of His servants of Abraham, you descendants of Jacob, His chosen ones. He is the Most High, our Creator. His judgments are pronounced throughout the earth. He always remembers His promises. The word that He commanded for 1,000 generations, the promise that He made to Abraham, and His sworn oath to Isaac. He confirmed it as a law for Jacob, as an everlasting promise to Israel, by saying, I will give you the land of Canaan. It is your share of the inheritance. While the people of Israel were few in number, a small group of foreigners living in that land, they wandered from nation to nation, from kingdom to another. He didn't permit anyone to oppress them. He warned kings about them. Do not touch my anointed ones or harm my prophets. He brought famine to the land. He took away their food supply. He sent a man ahead of them. He sent Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They hurt his feet with shackles and cut into his neck with an iron collar. The Most High's promise tested them through fiery trials until his prediction came true. The king sent someone to release him. The ruler of nations set him free. He made Joseph the master of his palace and the ruler of all his possessions. Joseph trained of the king's officers the way he wanted and taught his respected leaders wisdom. Then Israel came to Egypt. Jacob lived as a foreigner in the land of Ham. The Most High made His people grow rapidly in number and stronger than their enemies. He changed their minds so that they hated His people, and they dealt treacherously with His servants. He sent His servant Moses, and He sent Aaron, whom He had chosen. They displayed His miraculous signs among them and did amazing things in the land of Ham. He sent darkness and made their land dark. They did not rebel against His orders. He turned their water into blood and caused their fish to die. He made their land swarm with frogs, even in the king's bedrooms. He spoke, and swarms of flies and gnats infested their whole territory. He gave them hail and lightning instead of rain throughout their land. He struck their grapevines and fig trees and smashed the trees into their territory. He spoke, and countless locusts and grasshoppers came. They devoured all the plants in the land. They devoured the crops in the fields. He killed all the firstborn sons, the first ones in the land when their fathers were young. He brought Israel out with silver and gold, and no one among his tribe stumbled. The Egyptians were terrified of Israel, and so they were glad when Israel left. He spread out a cloud as a protective covering, and a fire to light up the night. The Israelites asked, and He brought them quail and filled them with bread from heaven. He opened a rock, and the waters gushed, and flowed like a river through the dry places. He remembered his holy promise to his servant Abraham. He brought his people out with joy, his chosen ones with a song of joy. He gave them the lands of the other nations, and they inherited what others had worked for, so that they would obey his laws and follow his teachings. Hallelujah. And it does seem like maybe they have strayed a bit from that. So, wow, we lost half of you guys in the reading of Psalms. So isn't that something? But I just figured I would read that with you guys while before we get started. And I've got a few things I just wanted to rant about for you guys this evening because why not? We're definitely going through it, and sending out blessings and love to everyone out there who's suffering, lonesome, struggling. The struggle is real. The starving people in Gaza that have lost everything don't even have a place to live or a way to cook a hot meal. And yet our country still subsidizes Israel to the tune of billions of dollars every year. Where are the sanctions and the threats of military intervention for war crimes against Israel? Our sworn allegiance and alliance to Israel, is it really so powerful so as to make us blind to the pure face of evil they've become in the land? And while our problems and struggles domestically certainly pale in comparison to that of the people, starving and homeless in the war-torn Gaza Strip, certainly teetering on a definition of genocide, the struggle here is still very real. In some ways, we don't have the strange sort of benefit of a clearly defined enemy. Our enemy is not so easily named or envisioned, but the struggle is very real. Modern life without a secure, safe place to call home is sort of a waking nightmare. In the wealthiest and most technologically advanced country in the history of the world, how is it even possible that decent, hardworking people from coast to coast can even, find themselves homeless? Surely there must be some safety net, some social program that we've all paid into with our tax dollars over the course of a lifetime. And, with all the billions of dollars we send to the likes of Israel and other countries the world over, surely there's got to be some money left over for our natural born damn citizens who find themselves in financial ruin, who have paid into the coffers of the United States their whole lives, facing the very real prospect of starvation and homelessness. Surely there's got to be something left if we've got literally dozens of billions of dollars just to blow over to the likes of Israel, who are committing a genocide against innocent people, men, women, and children. For many of us, the possibility of being without a home is just so foreign because, frankly, we've always had a place to rest and recuperate if life deals us a bad hand. Most of us have families that care about our well-being. If the shit really hits the proverbial fan, we can always sort of begrudgingly pop over to Ma's and, maybe heat up a Hot Pocket and have a place to sleep while we work for the first few weeks of a job until the first paycheck or two come in. Even if our credit gets maxed out and the savings account's tapped, many of us have a fail-safe in the form of immediate family that we can count on if things are just too far behind, too dire. But for some, when, say, a medical problem emerges and the funds dry up and the credit gets maxed out, it equates to a five-alarm disaster. For many of us, there is no safety net or backup plan, no family to call on if the wolves at our door begin to break through and snarl beyond the threshold. And look at our jobs market. Our jobs are more and more frequently being replaced and outsourced to people overseas who can barely speak the English language. But at least they have a pulse, unlike the AIs that we're now being forced to compete with in the job market. Indeed, we're beginning to see domestic jobs that are generally considered stable and reserved for people with certain experience and skill sets honed and seasoned over the course of a lifetime being replaced, often overnight, by these so-called artificial intelligence clunkers. these mindless, soulless, plastic non-entities who don't call in sick, never show up even a minute late because of traffic, would never think of joining a union or asking for a raise or even like a vacation. They are now our direct competition in the workforce. And this will certainly only increase in the coming years. And the faceless, soulless corporations who are legally people, don't you forget, according to the Supreme Court, they absolutely love it. They're just chomping at their drooling bits at the thought of an autonomous workforce without a single human right or the slightest concept of due fairness or due process. They can finally have their Georgia Guidestones sanitized, humanless, cashless society where human interaction is a closely monitored, sanitized commodity. And let's not forget to mention the state of the rental housing market. Surely it is best to own a home, no doubt, as a home is the most valuable and appreciative investment a person or a family will ever make. This is not the days of June Cleaver, where home ownership is a practical surety for anyone willing to pull up their bootstraps and work hard. And so, sometimes, in lieu of home ownership, one's only option is to find a cheap house for rent, or at least it used to be, at least for like a temporary solution, until they can get into a stable situation and put a down payment on a mortgage, maybe. And indeed, by strict definition, a mortgage is a death note, I know, but that's besides the point. Some of us have never actually owned a home. But can you imagine if all the rent we've paid over, say, the last 25 years was being put into a property that you owned, gaining value and equity all the while? But instead, many of us have flushed, yes, quite literally flushed, hundreds of thousands of dollars down the proverbial toilet on the basic human necessity of shelter, with nothing at all to show for it but a lifelong longing for home. When we become slaves to basic human necessities like housing, there is a serious problem in our society, but because that's the way it's always been, people just seem to take it for granted and assume that it's acceptable, especially if it's not you who's forced to scramble to make higher and higher rent payments as the living wage stagnates and inflation eats away at the value of the very few dollars we might actually have left. Indeed, the struggle is very real, and the status quo rolls over yet another generation of us renters, enriching the upper classes lucky enough to have the financial and physical stability of the basic human necessity of shelter, the seemingly unattainable luxury of a home, at least for some. But alas, the rental housing market bubble has become so top-heavy, due in large part to brilliant websites like Airbnb. You see, some people are fortunate enough to own not just one home, but many multiples of homes. Instead of selling them or renting them out like they used to, they just sit on them, waiting for their initial investment in that property to grow, often exponentially so, before they would even consider selling it or never renting it out. Historically, such people would rent these houses out using a year or 2 year lease agreement in order to have some money coming in to cover their mortgage on the property while nobody really lived in it permanently, but it was still sort of a win-win situation. It's a home to live in for one family, and the homeowner gets to enjoy the equity being built in the property that they don't have to pay for. But now that Airbnb and other similar such sites are available, the guy that's sitting on a dozen houses or even scores of houses, and there are such people out there who apparently have an obsession or like an addiction to purchasing homes and sitting on them, such people aren't really interested in selling, at least not for realistic or reasonable prices. And they're certainly not renting them out, not in the era of Airbnb. And, why would they? One can simply list their home on Airbnb and eventually it'll get rented out for maybe a week or a weekend or maybe a couple weeks for the same amount that the homeowner might have expected to receive for a month or even 2 months rent. The short-term vacation rental market has decimated the rental housing market in many rural areas to the point that it's practically impossible to find an affordable place to rent anymore. Why do you think we're seeing businesses pop up where people are converting shipping containers into makeshift housing units? And the era of tiny homes is becoming more and more popular in the greatest, wealthiest country in the history of the world. So, in the era of Airbnb, renting out houses is really a silly idea for many people, especially those of us who are, addicted to owning homes. And there are people out there I've spoken with in my different projects I've worked on. There's people that really seem to be addicted to hoarding homes. There aren't any laws against it, but perhaps one could argue there should be. When the basic human necessity like shelter becomes a luxury, unavailable to huge swaths of the population, I would say we have a bit of a problem, no? And alas, the divide between rich and poor, haves and have-nots, thus expands. It expands into a cavernous chasm wherein it's becoming less and less feasible for your average person to even have a chance to make it in modern America. Not only does this cause the available rental houses on the market to decrease, in response, the prices for the few houses that eventually pop up on the market thusly increases. Supply and demand, right? I've never seen such a ridiculous price tags on really quite hideous 1 or 2 bedroom apartments or trailers. I mean, really, you'll see like $1,200 a month for a 1 bedroom single wide manufactured in like fucking 1985. I mean, what the crap? It leaves one to fantasize about axing oneself, quite frankly, sometimes. When the prospect of death becomes favorable to another day in the grind of modern life, perhaps we've gone astray somewhere in this American experiment. Could the illegitimate Federal Reserve have anything to do with this, I wonder? As a side note, definitely check out the audiobook, Creature from Jekyll Island. I'll leave a card for that here if I can remember. It really is an awesome expose about the illegitimacy of the Fed and our fiat currency, the dollar, which is a vehicle for modern slavery and the incremental theft of everyone's money using the hidden tax of inflation. But yeah, they've been robbing us blind for over 100 years now, and nobody seems to care. Indeed, inflation isn't just some mystery that the government is trying to solve. It's a damn scam, and they've been running that scam on us for over 100 years. And until more people recognize the scam and demand a drastic change, nothing will ever improve in terms of our systemic financial imbalances across entire cross sections of the population. Unless you're in the banking business, you're being screwed over by the Fed, assuming that you use the dollar for anything whatsoever. The Creature from Jekyll Island does a great job explaining exactly how this scam works and exactly what we can do to solve the problem. Although it will be a difficult battle, anything is better than the dog and pony show that we're currently stuck with. Years ago, one could always count on affordable rental housing, even if that sometimes required a willingness to move into a place that wasn't exactly in the best part of town, maybe with some rowdy neighbors and your quintessential liquor store / gun store combo on the corner. What could go wrong there, eh? The point is, you could make it work, at least until you could stack up some checks, thanks to the rent being so cheap. But those days are long gone, my friends. The same place described above is no longer cheap, or even affordable, or even remotely close to affordable for that matter, because the owner of such properties knows how bare the available rental housing market actually is. He can charge some exorbitant price for a subpar rental unit, and some poor bastard will pay it. You gotta have a place to live, right? And it's no skin off his arse because his 7 other properties in a decent part of town are raking in triple their worth on an Airbnb contract, so he can afford to take a loss on the slum. Hell, every now and then when a convention comes to town, someone will even pay rent on the single wide 1 bedroom for the week and, pay more money than he could ever get on a monthly lease agreement with a local. Because you see, the locals know better than to pay premium prices for a shithole in that particular district. The out-of-towner might leave a colorful review, but he's going to have to pay. And because of, the rowdy neighbors shooting their pistolas into the air all night long, in the often roach-infested crap hole, but I'm probably preaching to the choir at this point. I've gone a bit astray. As the homeowner with 10 empty houses is raking in all that money, gaining equity in his homes, in his property, the housing market gets a little more upside down, and another telemarketer calls from a local number, but these quote unquote domestic telemarketers have never actually set foot on American soil, and the bubble grows just a little more. And some struggling family out there is forced to spend another week in an extended stay hotel or worse, on the street or in a pine box. The prospect of death begins to look a little bit better. At least you don't have to pay rent in hell, right? The never ending struggle with no end in sight seems to be a certain form of hell, anyways. Why should we pay to struggle in hell? Of course, it's a homeowner's right and prerogative to do whatever in the hell he wants to do with all dozen of his houses, and who am I to complain, right? They are, after all, his property. Even if he is addicted to purchasing houses and sitting on them perpetually, so he gets 7 houses, maybe even 8, while the struggling family still doesn't even have a single place to rent for a decent price by the month. Not even a shitty one for a high price by the month. And another week goes by where this family is forced to pay out a month's worth of rent every week at an extended stay hotel. Just a little bit closer to being fully homeless. Maybe they should have made better economic decisions. We do live in the richest and greatest country in the history of the world, after all. Surely they are drug-addled, freeloading grifters who obviously don't have anything of value to add to our great society. I mean, look at the state of our country. Everything is honky fucking dory, isn't it? And if you sense sarcasm in my voice, you're pretty damn sharp. And the prospect of cold, eternal sleep looks a little bit better. Unless one has family or friends to fall back on, there's a very sure path towards homelessness in the US of A. And it's not strictly reserved for the drug-addled schizos having full-blown arguments with themselves as they stumble down Main Street, as many of us have been conditioned into believing. Sure, such people do exist, but more and more decent, hardworking, well-educated people are finding themselves with a health problem or some other unforeseen major expense, which ultimately pushes them over the precipice towards ultimate financial ruin. And it is a slippery slope. Once that savings is tapped out and the credit is maxed, it doesn't take much to push us over the edge into the terrible abyss of homelessness. For many Americans, it's difficult to envision how a decent person with good work ethic could possibly find themselves without a place to rest their head at night. But I'm here to attest it can happen to anyone, given the wrong circumstances. I wouldn't wish this existence on my worst enemy. But let's quickly talk about those aggravating ass telemarketing calls we're forced to endure dozens of times a day. You know, the robot calls your phone, and silly you for answering because you thought in all your wisdom that the local number might actually be an indication that it's a local person on the other end calling from a local phone. Maybe one of the dozens of job applications you have out, or maybe it's a semi-affordable place to rent is calling back because one of their units finally came available. And so you stupidly answer that local number. And no, it's John Holmes calling from, Benghazi, South Carolina, or maybe it's Betty White calling from Doha, Qatar, Georgia, offering you some product or service that they can't rightly pronounce, let alone describe in a coherent manner. And so you tell them, I'm not interested, just take me off the list and hang up. And they call again less than 10 minutes later. Maybe not the same person, it's definitely a different person, who also just so happens to be named John Holmes from Benghazi, South Carolina, calling from a different local phone number, but he's offering the same damn product which he cannot rightly pronounce or describe. And of course, as a professional telemarketer myself for many years, I can personally attest to the fact that 9 out of 10 people absolutely loathe telemarketers, and for good reason. Most telemarketers suck. If you've ever made a friend of a telemarketer that bothered you at dinner, you've spoken with an ace, with a skill set barely found in 1 in 10,000 people. Telemarketing certainly isn't for everyone, okay? Of course, nobody wants to be bothered at home, to be sold on something they don't want. It's not an easy job, really. It's an art form. If you want to be successful at it, and it's certainly not for those of us with fragile egos or a propensity to cave in from rejection. A good telemarketer doesn't sell products or sell services, They sell themselves. Not like on a corner sell themselves, but not far from it. You have to get people whom you've never met, who absolutely hate your guts from Jump Street, to like you over the phone when they have absolutely made up their mind that you're like the worst person they will ever encounter, ever. And you don't just have to get them to like you, you have to get them to trust you and relinquish private information and money sometimes and agree to purchase something. Outbound cold calling residents is one of the most difficult jobs one can ever do. Of course, it's not physically demanding like roofing or digging trenches or running conduit or pulling wire at a construction site, granted, but it takes a certain combination of skill, personality, perseverance, dedication, wit, and talent, and oftentimes the pay isn't really all that great unless you perform well and there's commission involved. But alas, the days of the American telemarketer are really quite all but over. This one here is a relic among dinosaurs, actually. And the prospect of eternal rest just looks better and better, doesn't it? Quite frankly, I don't understand how the above described local telemarketers from Bangladesh, Alabama, certainly calling from some auto dialer in Southeast Asia somewhere, I don't understand for the life of me how they ever conduct a single successful call where, they actually get a sale or a contract at the end of the conversation. I really don't. Like, who the fuck is paying these people to make endless calls with no possibility of successful outcomes? None. But they are certainly in high demand to fill these jobs that were once my niche, my bread and butter, because they're willing to work for nothing. I mean, I've been bidding against overseas contractors for years. I mean, they've really quite decimated the professional integrity of the freelance telemarketing sector anymore. Being that I have done telemarketing over the years, I have a certain amount of respect or even empathy for the poor bastard on the other end of the phone. And so, me personally, I'll actually hear them out. I'll listen to their pitch, and I'll give them an honest to goodness chance to win me over. And if they do a good job, I'll buy or I'll set the appointment or whatever they're aiming to do. But it never happens, which is not a big surprise, because these poor people barely speak English. They don't even have a semblance of a pitch strategy. Truth be told, they suck on the phones and wouldn't stand a chance to get hired in any telemarketing room that I've ever run or worked in. They couldn't sell a warm blanket to a fucking Eskimo. But they're cheap. I know this firsthand because I compete against them all the time when bidding on contracts on sites like Upwork and other such freelance platforms. They're willing to work for literally pennies per hour plus commission, and so the professional integrity of the freelance industry for sales and CSR is down the proverbial shitter. As they say in South Park, they took our jobs. But it's true. The market for jobs working on the phones is a thing of the past, unless you're willing to bid like $1 per hour on a full-time gig. The principle of supply and demand has pitted Americans with American expenses and American living arrangements against people living overseas where $1 per hour is like rock star money. Took our jobs. And now more and more, we're not only competing against South Americans for manual labor jobs or manual labor jobs like construction, we're competing against Southeast Asians for semi-technical jobs like help desk, CSR, or sales, but now we're competing against clunkers. AI. At least the foreigners who have decimated the professional integrity of the entire industries in the wake of federal trade agreements like NAFTA and CAFTA and all. Again, at least they have a pulse. At least someone's families are being fed. I can't say that it makes me happy to receive 10 dozen fucking telemarketing calls every day from people who don't speak English and couldn't sell an ice cube to a dying man in the desert, but at least they put their pants on in the morning, right? But we can't say the same about the fucking clunkers. And finally, we're forced to compete against AI, also known as artificial incompetence, which is willing to work for free. The only reason I'm jealous of AIs is they don't have a pulse, being one who unfortunately fantasizes about the cold eternal rest of death on a daily basis. I dare say even the foreigners will be hard-pressed to beat the price when bidding on contracts. What, are we going to have to pay the client to work for them now in the hopes of getting commission? No commission. And we have to pay for the job? Thanks, AI. Artificial insanity is more like it. And I'm only half joking about all this. With the state of the housing market so bleak, even the rental housing market in such a form that many people just give up trying to find a place to live and either move in with their family or like live in a damn hotel until they can get into something decent and affordable. The job market in two major sectors, at least, which happen to be my personal niche and livelihood for decades, are being carted overseas and subbed out to foreigners, and now the damn clunkers. It leaves one in such a depressed and confused state it's difficult to describe. And this struggle is real. The American dream for this writer is indeed a waking nightmare. If you can't relate to this either because you're independently wealthy or you're fortunate enough to work in a sector which pays well and is relatively insulated from outsourcing to foreigners or clunkers, my advice to you is don't get too comfortable. Sure, things are just fine right now, finer than Forrest Gump on frog legs, but it's just a matter of time before you might just find yourself in a situation where your very livelihood is being pulled out from under your feet by the likes of AI or maybe some other, I don't know, sector of foreigners. Who knows? But if you don't own a home and you're in a lease agreement for your housing, or worse, if you're like me and you're mired in the hotel trap yet again, you might want to seriously rethink it. If you're in any type of industry where your job could conceivably be filled by an AI clunker, be very wary. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist, I'm just being real with you. I mean, we could see them replacing jobs like trucker or, accountant or doctor in the very near future. So my family is very much at the end of our rope when it comes to housing and gainful employment. Most of the opportunities that I once took for granted have all but dried up. I can't compete against foreigners willing to work for $1 or $2 an hour, or clunkers willing to work for free. Sure, a domestic seasoned professional would do a much better job than either, but no clients want to pay out what we're actually worth because the professional integrity of these industries has eroded into nothing. And the federal guidelines, which American contractors are forced to operate within, simply don't apply to overseas contractors or AIs who are sucking up American jobs more and more each day. So if you own a home, especially if you own it outright, I implore you not to sell it. Hang on to your homes. The peace of mind one gets for having a guaranteed home to lay your head on is priceless. If you're like the guy that owns a dozen homes, maybe consider selling a few, or at least renting a few out, And, again, I hate to sound like an alarmist, but my family is now basically homeless, living in an extended stay hotel that we can't afford. I'm having one hell of a time getting contracts for income or finding an affordable place to rent. Even the outdated one-bedroom single-wide trailer is literally over $1,000 a month. And when every penny you earn goes right to the hotel for rent, it's practically impossible to come up with first and last month's rent, deposit for electric and gas, etc. This struggle is very real. Without the support of our friends out there, we're like dead in the water. The bullets for breakfast are looking better and better. When you envy the ones who found an early grave, perhaps there's something wrong in the culture. Finally, I appreciate everyone out there who has helped in the past. I realize it seems ridiculous to be stuck in such a spiral for any length of time, but it is a trap. My family has made our way out of the hotel trap in the past. We've worked our way up through roommate situations only to have our lives and livelihood ripped to shreds by Hurricane Helene almost a year ago. And we still really haven't recovered from that. The struggle is very real, and I'm only half joking about the allure of the cold sleep of death. I'm praying for miracles and support from the army of God on earth. The Most High Creator is real, and His realm is intended to be a utopia for our people. The current systems in place have created a sort of dog-eat-dog mindset in everyone, which makes the richest 1% even richer at the expense of the poorest people among us. This realm isn't supposed to be like this. It's upside down and backwards, but I believe we can one day have the utopia this place was intended to be. So with that, I'm going to wrap this one up, you guys. I appreciate you joining me this evening. Love you guys very much. Thanks, BK Dave. And am I tied to the area, PJ? Yeah, not really. I mean, my wife has a lot of health problems, and she's not really fit to travel, but I don't have a car. We're not very mobile, but no, I mean, I'm not exactly tied to the area. My contact information is below. I'm going down to the temp agency early in the morning. I'm gonna try to get out on a work ticket tomorrow. We'll see how that goes, and I'm gonna keep on bidding on projects. It ain't easy, but I just wanted to get that out there, get the rent done. One love, you guys. I'll do some NASA news probably tomorrow when I get home in the afternoon. Y'all be good. One love, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, Rocket, take it easy.